The Bitcoin Group, the American original. For over the last 10 seconds, the sharpest Satoshis, the best Bitcoins, the hardest cryptocurrency talk. We'd like to welcome our panelists. Dan Eve, the Crypto Raptor.
Hello, Bitcoins.
And I'm Thomas Hunt from the World Crypto Network. Still not sure that this is working. It's looking to me like we're broadcasting a black screen. Can anyone confirm that we're working and not having technical... Oh, there it is. Oh, it looks fine. Everything's fine. Moving on to issue 1. Issue 1. Bitcoin in stasis below 27K ahead of Powell's speech. U.S. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell will speak late Friday morning at the Perspectives on Monetary Policy panel before the Thomas Laubach Research Committee. Everyone will be looking at what Powell says, trying to find out if he's going to raise or lower interest rates and how then this could affect Bitcoin. Dan Eve, what do you think about the price of Bitcoin? Everyone's just waiting to see what the Federal Reserve does.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Like, obviously it may have a slight impact, but I don't know. I think the politics doesn't really hit the same way as it used to, right? Like, you know, back in the day, especially when it was something like China's thinking of banning Bitcoin, and then it was like everything would fall to crap, and then it'd be like China's not banning it, or they're reconsidering, and then everything would pump again. It kind of it doesn't really follow that same kind of pattern it used to, where the news would really have such a significant impact on the price of Bitcoin. But ultimately, the hash rate, the things that really matter, like the hash rate, for example, is still 350 something exahashes, which is still like within about 10% of all-time high. And the difficulty is at all-time high, 49.55 trillion. And we know from covering various mining sort of articles that the mining industry just keeps on growing, and especially now that we're in this we seem to be at the end of the bear crypto Bitcoin winter, and starting to kind of we're in the run up within 1 year right now of the halvening, so things are starting to kind of perk up a bit. They're going to still be up and down, it's still going to be turbulent. But ultimately, the infrastructure keeps on building, the things keep on building. So that's kind of what I rate Bitcoin on. And the users as well, the number of users, the number of wallets or addresses with holding Bitcoin grows. So those are really the right fundamentals. The price just kind of follows everything else. So yeah, I think it's lovely looking at the price. It's nice seeing a bit of pump. It always makes me a bit sad seeing a bit of a dump, but at the same time, I know that it's really, you know, it's really just means nothing in the whole grand scheme of things, because Bitcoin is building.
Well, I do think everyone's waiting to see if the Federal Reserve will finally stop raising rates, allowing the stock market to go up, and then, as we've seen, Bitcoin to follow it up. For me, the Bitcoin price this week is more about the fear of the Republicans not raising the debt ceiling in the United States, which would cause the United States to default on its debt, causing a worldwide crisis. Hopefully they can stave that off with negotiations, or possibly the 14th Amendment, saying that the United States cannot default on its debt. But the idea of a major government in the world defaulting on its debt publicly seems like the kind of crisis that Bitcoin's made for, which surprisingly might cause Bitcoin to go up. Nobody else is here this week, Dan, so it's just you predicting against the magic Bitcoin ball, the source of all truth and knowledge in the universe. I know you've had a lot of success lately, so here it goes. Will the price of Bitcoin be higher or lower this time next week?
Well, surprisingly, I think I said up last time, and it did go. It seems like it has gone up, which is a really, really rare thing, because I'm usually terribly wrong about these things. So I'm going to say up again and see if I can be right twice in which is a record for me, twice in a row.
Well, I'm always bullish. I never understand why Bitcoin goes down, but they tell me it has to. So let's see what the ball thinks. Will the price of Bitcoin be higher this time next week? It's very dark in here. The ball says, better not tell you now. better not tell you now. The ball does not answer.
Sneaky ball, sneaky.
Moving on to issue 2. The MPs are right. Bitcoin is just gambling and should be treated as such. An interesting view from the United Kingdom from the Evening Standard, which I thought was a newspaper, but maybe it's just a tabloid. They're talking about how the UK should not get into Bitcoin. They should ignore this technology and treat it like gambling. They say that Bitcoin and crypto has no intrinsic value, huge price volatility, and no discernible social good. In other words, it's like a William Hill shop and should be treated as such. We can leave the global crypto tech hub to somewhere else. Thomas Hunt, what do you think of this dramatic view from the United Kingdom? Well, obviously, I'm surprised that a country has been so wrecked by Brexit would want to close the door on another set of ideas. I think it's hilarious to see Bitcoin described as only gambling. For so long, we knew that it was much more than that. You could use it to buy drugs on the Silk Road. You could use it for money laundering and tax evasion. And now they tell me that it's only gambling. When in reality, we know that it's this incredible technology that allows you to do so many things and more with the Lightning Network now, with ordinals, with stamps, with liquid NFTs, with so many other options, multi-signature technologies. It's so much more than gambling. It's a full-fledged financial revolution. But this writer in the UK is not interested in that revolution and would rather have the United Kingdom stay home. Dan, what do you think of your fellow countryman here and his dislike for that dirty gambling Bitcoin?
Well, obviously the report was pretty ridiculous in itself, saying it pretty much said that, right? It's only used for like drugs and kidnapping and extortion and stuff like that, which is obviously it's obviously ludicrous. The article itself, I mean, I don't know how anyone could like read this and consume it as actual news. It's like it's just another version of old man moaning with vague references. Well, not old man, but I'm thinking of the meme, old man yelling at sky. But it's just a dude with moaning with vague references to an actual news article. The whole thing's just so incredibly biased. I remember back in my day when people read the news and like they read it without like going and so blah blah blah, and it just, the whole article just smacks like, I mean, yeah, how can you take anything seriously? And this is the financial element of the Evening Standard, right? Bearing in mind, Bitcoin's been around now, what, over 13 years. It's not something, is it over 13 years? No, yeah, it is, isn't it? Oh, blimey. So yeah, it's not something that's just like popped up. And, it's not 10 years ago when this thing, we were still kind of assessing whether it's, whether it's a viable, alternative to money. It's the most uptime in any network, right? It's the most secure network. Like, to say these things have no intrinsic value is obviously ludicrous, because not even, say, Google have an uptime of 99.9%, or the biggest tech giants on earth. But when there's lines like, there were whines from predictable quarters, folk with job titles like crypto and digital assets technical director. I mean, you just know the person's a twat who's writing it, let's be honest, right? And even just like saying, like making out as if they would even know what Bitcoin is, what the reason why Bitcoin is here, and the reason and what underpins it, how it gets its value, like people using it, for example, Metcalfe's law and all that. But they say, oh, it's a they say it's a speculative .com stock. Like a company that has no revenue. And it's like, how can you insult something where you don't even understand it? It's like, I just think that's laughable. And anyone who's reading this with any shred of like of brain would be thinking, maybe like this guy's got such a bias. Maybe he actually doesn't know what he's talking about, and he doesn't appear to know what he's talking about in the article. He just sort of and tries to mock Bitcoin. Like he also mentions about. He was saying that people were annoyed because they think Bitcoin's going to save the world. Well, that's not really true. People just think that Bitcoin's a better form of money, and they don't trust like basically twats like him that are running financial systems right now because of the issues that we had in the past. Like you can't trust banks. You can't trust you as we've seen in the US recently. You can't trust the banks. You know that with the recent failures that now are more financially than 2008. I mean, obviously that doesn't. I don't think that's adjusted for inflation, which is obvious. Which it hasn't been adjusted for inflation, which is again inflation. The reason why Bitcoin's here, because money's printed out of thin air and it's devaluing your currency. Again, you know, if you're going to just mock something that you don't understand, at least like try and like no one cares about a counter argument, but actually give reasons against it rather than just going rabble used for pillaging and stuff like that, stupid crypto bros or whatever they do usually, right? And do this sexist kind of crypto bros, you know, the sort of thing or whatever it is. But yeah, it's just codswallop, basically. Codswallop, nice old fashioned English word, codswallop, for a codswallop article.
It is pretty bad. Like you said, Dan, it reminds me a lot of the old man yelling at the sky meme, Grandpa Simpson out there. And it also reminds me of Warren Buffett, the way that he just doesn't seem to understand Bitcoin, internet companies, and technology. And I hope, you know, when I get older, that the things that I don't understand, I won't go out there and opine about. You kids and your rock and roll music. It sounds just like that, saying that Bitcoin's only for gambling. And, you know, the UK is supposed to be the financial capital of the world. Good luck with that if you're just going to treat Bitcoin like gambling. I was reminded a lot of the Serenity Prayer. So I went ahead and looked it up here. It says, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And it seems like this author is running against things that he cannot change, things that he does not understand, and just kind of making a fool of himself. Incidentally enough here, it says that Reinhold Niebuhr wrote the Serenity Prayer, who also wrote that famous poem of, you know, when they came for the church makers and they didn't come for me. I forget the exact words, but, you know, they came
first they came for so-and-so and then they came for...
Yeah. And they didn't come for me. And then at the end, you know, they come for him. So quite powerful words, and something that maybe the author should take to understand. When he doesn't understand new technology, you can't just put it in a box like, this is just for gambling, this is just for drug money, this is just for these things. Because when you look at money broader, we come back and I always hear those Andreas words, you know, haunting you. You know, like, if your money can't buy drugs and prostitution, what good is your money? And I mean, he's absolutely right. Like, money buys stuff. Like, US dollars, whether we like it or not, are used in palletfuls in like Iraq and other countries to bribe warlords, to bribe dictators. Like, $20 bills are often used to bribe anyone across the world. And that makes it valuable. That makes it useful. As Danny DeVito said in the fantastic David Mamet film Heist, that's why they call it money. It's the stuff that everyone wants. It's called money. So
I think that the going back, so obviously I went slightly, I actually did a bit of an ad hominem against that, which is bad because that's always like the lowest form of debate, right? So I feel like a twat for calling someone a twat, and I apologize. Not that he'd be listening because he hates Bitcoin, obviously. So fuck him. But anyway, sorry.
It seems that the tone of the article is much more farcical and opinion related. Perhaps we're reading it as, but yes, it was
it teased
humorous take. Let us know in the chat. What do you think? Is Bitcoin only gambling? Should you go down to a slot parlor and, you know, put your money in a Bitcoin ATM and then get the same feeling as a slot machine? I'm not sure it's going to do that for you.
Well, one thing is though that you can guarantee, so in the UK, I'm not sure what it's like in the US, but gambling has no tax on gains, and I know full well that if they say, oh, it's gambling, and put all the regulatory framework around Bitcoin as they would for gambling, they're still going to tax you for the gains. It's going to be the best of both worlds, whilst being utter morons and stifling a new technology, which is clearly growing, is not going anywhere, is unstoppable. And so it's just ludicrous. You know, as you're saying, there's obviously issues after we've done Brexit with the economy. So why are we going to go and like drive businesses elsewhere? Like we used to, it will say they say they now. I'm distancing myself, and there's more from that later. I've got a surprise, and don't get too excited. But anyway, distancing myself from England and its crazy, ridiculous ideas that Bitcoin is just for gambling, who will then tax you on your gambling gains as well. So that's going to suck. I know they'll end up doing that, right? It will be the best of both worlds. They'll be able to regulate it hardcore, and then also make sure that you're giving them money for being idiots and making bad policies and stifling innovation. Shame on you. Shame on you.
I don't know. I think the article should have led with a no tax thing. Bitcoin is like gambling, and we don't want to tax your gains. Cryptocurrency lovers, come to the United Kingdom, where we have backwards laws that will treat Bitcoin like gambling and let you have untaxed gains. You got to look at the bright side, right? There's always a silver lining,
Yeah, that's the fact that the article, like, that's so crucial, I think, to anyone covering this article. That's one of the most crucial things. If you're talking about how it's going to be regulated in future, then say something that's actually like meaningful about it. Don't just like waffle in thin air. Like say, oh, obviously, gambling gains aren't taxed. What are the implications of that? Will it drive people to the country? Will it drive them out? Will it drive more Bitcoin bros there? And blah blah blah, and to go down that route. But it just, the whole thing is just it's just drivel. It's just like the worst of all the other articles that just moan about Bitcoin put together. The only thing I think it's missing, is moaning about Bitcoin boiling whales in the environment and the energy it uses. Otherwise, it would have been a bingo, full house or whatever it is. It would have been a bingo like line of waffle.
Well, and I think the problem is once you throw in the tax issue and you start thinking about this seriously, you're like, are we going to allow whole companies to come into the United Kingdom and set up, and, they look like tech firms like Coinbase, they're fintech, right? We're going to like, you're a gambling company, you're dirty. What are they thinking about, trying to spread the future of their country, trying to survive? Just seems like a bad idea. We better move on to the next issue. Check out worldcryptonetwork.com, where we've got the brand new calendar. There are 366 days on which we've made a video here at the World Crypto Network combined with Mad Bitcoins. You can scroll through them all and click on a day and see how many videos we made in each year, as well as see all the videos for free at worldcryptonetwork.com and madbitcoins.com. Issue 3. Tether buys back Bitcoin with a portion of its net profit. Tether said that it would invest 15% of its net profit into Bitcoin to diversify the reserves that back its USDT token, which aims to stick to a 1-to-1 peg to the US dollar. That would amount to roughly $222 million based on the company's latest report, which said the company generates $1.48 billion in net profit. Dan, Eve, what do you think about Tether buying in to Bitcoin?
Well, I mean, it's a good sign that 220 million is not a small chunk of money. Whatever you think of their operations, and the fact that it is, it's not a utility token. It's meant to be a stable coin, right? It hasn't actually depegged like any of the others have, has it yet? Not as bad as, say, what happened to USDC and DAI. But ultimately, it's something that has a lot of use. As much as people don't like the idea of selling Bitcoin, lots of people use it for scaling out of Bitcoin, whether they just want to day trade, if that's their thing and they want to do it, they're entitled to do it. It's a free market and all that. And or whether they just, they hold Bitcoin as their savings, and they have a big expense coming up. So if they think there's going to be a bit of a downturn, they'll trade out into Tether just to kind of freeze that money so that they can use it for whatever expense it is. So it does have a use, and ultimately it's the highest. I wouldn't say highest performing; it's the wrong word, but it's got the highest volume traded of all currencies. And that's consistently, right? It's still, Bitcoin right now is $11.9 billion, and Tether's 18. I think when we last talked about it, it's $28 billion of trading compared to about 17, 18 of Bitcoin. So it's consistently the most traded asset. And I think actually, if you take the trading volume of Tether, and it's probably more than all of the other. I think it is all of the other coins combined, and that's including actually USDC, which says about 2.6 billion of volume, and Binance BUSD of 1.9. So it's a very significant chunk of the trading volume. Obviously, people use it now as a gateway to get into other things. Back in the day, it was you had to buy Bitcoin. Everything, the index was Bitcoin, right? Bittrex, Mint, all of those, they didn't have a stable coin that you could use. You would have to go from Bitcoin into whatever shitcoin you wanted to, or you would pay a huge premium to go from Bitcoin to sell it out into fiat money. Whereas at least this gives you the ability to hedge out and in as you see fit. And actually have a much better spread. So yeah, I think it has a use. The fact that it says the article says stablecoins are already a hot button issue for regulators who have been scrambling to figure out how to keep the industry in check after the demise of several notable firms in the space. They never seem to mention about the scrambling to figure out how to keep the industry in check for like the banks that have just gone down in the US. Like there's a reason why the traditional system is so fallible, and that's because if you're saying that crypto isn't regulated enough, then I know for sure that the banking industry, and it's very clear the banking industry isn't regulated enough, because the banking industry is a very evolved industry. And when you've got big players that are falling, and multiple of them in the same year, in a probably quicker succession actually than the failures we've seen. If you see the spread from UST and Terra and to FTX. So I think it's all a bit crazy. But as anything that you can say about crypto being and not Bitcoin being not regulated as much as it should be, applies tenfold to the traditional banking system. But one thing is funny in the FTX news, I don't know if you've seen, is that FTX is now suing Sam Bankman-Fried for I think for hundreds of millions of dollars or something like that. So that's just the gift that keeps on giving it, the old FTX tale.
It's the best. But going back to Tether and Bitcoin, I think that it's good for Bitcoin and it's good for Tether, but I'm not crazy about how Tether got the money. It seemed to me, if you go back in time, Tether said they had US dollars in an account equal to the number of Tether that there were being printed. But in actuality, Tether took that money in the account and used it to bet on Bitcoin. Now, sure, they happened to bet on Bitcoin at a fantastic time, at an all-time low, at a great moment that got them swept up to where now they have more money than they should, and they don't know what to do with it. So again, they're going to put it into Bitcoin. Hopefully it works out for them and it's great and everything, but it's another example of once you give someone your money, like Dan said with SBX and FTX, they can do what they want with it. Whether your money is Bitcoin or altcoin or dollars or whatever, you put it in their account. You expect FTX to have separate accounts. You expect Tether to not go gambling with the money, but it always seems to happen. You just can't. Trusting third parties is consistently a mistake, whether it's computing or money or Bitcoin or whatever. And the problem with this is, it just might work. Tether invested wisely in Bitcoin last time. They might invest wisely in Bitcoin this time. There may never be a problem because they win their bets. But if they lose their bets, watch out.
Yeah, it seems like it's a good time to be edging in. We're probably due another little dump, like at some point, right? That's just what happens on the run up to a bull run. But if they hold until post bull run, then they're probably going to be doing pretty good. And $1.8 billion of profit in per quarter. I mean, that's pretty incredible. Like that's huge profit. And I think that obviously they get a lot of flack from about they try and be public and say they're audited, but obviously that relies on a third party where you can't see where the money is exactly. And although they're audited, as Josh pointed out last week, there's still the ability for them to have contracts that essentially loan out the money or not loan out the money, but the money is essentially someone else's, but it's contractually theirs. So there's kind of things that go behind the scenes where there still could be a reduced trust. But ultimately, it's a company that makes a lot of money if they're buying lots of Bitcoin. I think it's also a very good thing. I think it's like 2% of their assets that are currently held in Bitcoin now. So they are a very big player in the game in terms of holding Bitcoin. Sorry, dogs. Izzy doesn't like Tether. Tether's okay.
Well, the famous expression, they close the barn door now that all the horses have gone. And it's great for Tether to be audited now. It's great to have it in accounts now. After you've taken customer funds and made a giant bet on Bitcoin like a roulette wheel, we talked about gambling before, they won their bet. And now, as far as I know, after you make a big bet and win it, you don't really need to make another big bet. They can kind of keep coasting on what they have, and this investment in Bitcoin seems to be part of that coast. So I think it's going to work out for them. I'm positive. Moving on to issue 4. Is Ledger's new Bitcoin key recovery feature safe? Experts have doubts. The French wallet maker believes the service will help attract customers turned off by crypto's unforgiving self-custody ethos. But critics wonder whether the concept is compatible with a real hardware wallet. What about Ledger's new Bitcoin recovery feature? Thomas Hunt. Well, we've talked about hardware wallets on the show a lot, and usually we talk about Trezor. We always mention Ledger, sometimes maybe Blockstream Jade or Cold Card, one of the other options. I forget them all. Apologies if I forgot your one. But Ledger's always had a problem. It's never been open source, and that's always led to a default lack of trust in Ledger. You're trusting the company, which was partially funded by some French government grants, to hold your keys and to not expose them, right? But if it's not open source, you can't really check it. I was pretty disturbed by the reply by Thomas from Ledger. He's a classic old school Bitcoiner, so respect to him, of course. But he says, so people started to think Ledger was a trustless solution, which is not the case. Some amount of trust must be placed into Ledger to use the product. If you don't trust Ledger, meaning you treat your hardware manufacturer as an adversary, that can't work at all. And while I do agree with some of what he's saying, I do have to trust someone like Ledger or Trezor to make the device to uphold the security standards and do the best they can with the device. If they're designing features that allow you to recover your keys, as many people have said on the internet, it's only one more loop for a hacker to run that feature. Once you start having that feature, you make it easier for the hacker to run that feature. You make it easier for your key to be backed up, maybe on Ledger's server. I think they had a similar problem with their mailing list. The Ledger mailing list was hacked because it was on a marketing server and it wasn't guarded well, which was a big problem because these are all customers of a hardware wallet company, implying they have Bitcoin. It's a little bigger than just a marketing problem. And for them to not see that, or not to see this as the huge problem it is, I don't have a great deal of trust in the Ledger company. Obviously, you can make your own choices when it comes to hardware wallets. I still think Trezor, maybe Blockstream Jade, although Jade had the same thing where it has weird stuff like a Bluetooth feature and a wireless feature or something. And I'm like, less features, more hardware wallets. But I guess I'm one of those intractable crypto hold your own keys people that surprisingly Thomas from Ledger is speaking against, almost like Elon Musk going after the laptop class. Dan, Eve, what do you think of Ledger's latest feature, recovery keys?
Well, it's an interesting point that it's the only part I agree with, that he says that you still have to. It's not even, it's not entirely trustless, right? But most people, like 99.99% of people, even who use open source as much as possible, they're still trusting in a number of things. Like if you're interacting with a MacBook, you are trusting in Apple that they don't have something that intercepts the whatever it is that's being run. The same with Windows, the down to the very chip, the CPU that's running whatever it is. You're trusting that doesn't have something built in that has some sort of backdoor. So we unfortunately, unless you build everything from scratch and know exactly how everything works, and that's it down to the fabrication process. You're trusting that even there was an open source chip, right? You're trusting that in the fabrication process of that chip that nothing else happened. So it's there's always some element of trust, but that's the only part I agree with. I like the way he kind of almost thought it was not a gotcha, but like one of his retorts. He was like, basically, we've always been able to do it. So they then deleted that tweet pretty quickly. But the fact is that even if it's opt-in, and even if you were fully aware of it and you had to choose the firmware to be upgraded and know that they're introducing this feature and that you would be opting in, the back door's already there. Like there's the back door. It goes against what they said there in tweets. It says where they said a firmware update can't extract the private keys from the secure element, which is obviously which was actually BS now. What they also say is I like the way they say during the recovery process, it's not the private key itself that's getting extracted, but the seed phrase encoding it. But I mean, just think about that. What does the seed phrase give you access to? All the private keys. Like that's the whole point of it. So like that's not even a defense point. That's just a ridiculous. And they say all encryption, fragmentation, and decryption of your secret recovery phrase happens on your ledger on the secure element. So the only thing that leaves is the secure element chip. Is the and after your consent are the encrypted shards. So what leaves is your seed phrase, whether or not it's encrypted, and whether whoever it's still your seed phrase still leaves. Like it means that the seed doesn't stay on your device. That was the whole kind of point of it, right? So the fact is like, fun fact, we've always been able to take it. Now it's actually done by Shamir Secret, as they say, which actually, well, I was looking into this because I switched from Ledger to Trezor, and long overdue, partly because of laziness. But Vlad did a really good. Vlad Costa from Castilla from the Bitcoin Takeover podcast did a really good video actually explaining Shamir secrets. So you should go like YouTube, but check that out on YouTube if you want an explanation of how that works. I think ultimately it's. I think like as much as this, I think it's a kind of good idea, but not in any way that they executed it. If they did like a separate device, which it wasn't relevant to the old devices. They did a separate device. And, as they kind of describe it, the mum and dad device, or however they sort of phrase it, that like, it's the halfway house, right? It's like, people who don't want to store their keys because they don't trust themselves to store this phrase, and they're holding it on an exchange. At least they're using a hardware device. At least they're using a hardware device, and they're opting in, and it's a specific one, and not the actual ledger. And they're, when you buy it, this. Then that's a different story to just rolling it out to every ledger and being like, oh, come on, we could have got your keys at any time anyway. I mean, it's just totally messed up. It's really displaced their trust. I think people are going to move much more quicker now to like open source devices like Trezor, like Jade, Blockstream's Jade. So I think that's kind of a good thing. It gets people more involved in the open source side. But yeah, after Ledger's data breach, and I don't think, as you mentioned, I don't think it was specifically Ledger, but it was like the MailChimp or whatever service they were using where the mailing list went. That's a big thing. You've already misplaced people's trust. And so
that was an example of a failure in strategic thinking. where the mailing
Yeah.
list was far more valuable than they thought it was. They thought it was something, oh, marketing guy, go set it up, put your password on. It doesn't matter if you have 2FA, doesn't matter if we're using a secure service, or maybe MailChimp got hacked, whatever it was. That list was far too valuable, and it was treated casually and without care. And then once it's leaked, I mean, Dan, I think you're on the Ledger list. I think people could look you up, and other of our friends
Yep.
on that list. And you get phone calls and hackers and emails and phishing
Yeah.
emails. And sure, we all want to be smart people. We say, oh, I'm not going to fall for that. I'm above that. But out there are some people that will fall for it, and they don't need to be exposed to it. And they're being exposed to it because this list was undervalued. In the same way, when I read this article and I hear about what Ledger's doing, like Dan says, maybe they should have a hardware device for mom and dad, the easy hardware device. But why does it have to be a false promise then? Because what good is a hardware device? How is the mom and dad hardware device better than Coinbase? It's not. I mean, it's still just trusting a third party. Maybe it's trusting a third party, and now you have to find a physical device. So it's even worse. It's like Coinbase, but you have to find your ledger, or you don't get your money back. So it doesn't seem to deliver what the other hardware wallets deliver. And I know it's difficult, but writing down the 24-word seed phrase, especially writing it down twice, having 2 copies and your Trezor or your Jade or whatever you like, that's pretty clever. Like, that's not that difficult. Once people have done that, they have a real hardware wallet. They can really hold their own funds. And the simplest thing for them to then do is they should just have a webpage where they say, here's how you get a safety deposit box in your country. And they should say what, again, I love quoting Andreas. I wish he was here, but he would say over and over again how we have thousands of years of physical security. We know all about vaults and security guards and, checklists and all these things that will essentially keep your safe deposit box safe. You could also get 2 or 3 safe deposit boxes. You could get 2 or 3 Jade wallets or Trezors or Ledgers or whatever. You could put one in each one. You'd have so much more security for mom and dad than this fake hardware wallet. Like, I don't feel that Ledger's actually delivering the mom and dad product, and they're not delivering them the actual security that a cold wallet has. I mean, yes, you have the possibility of losing it, but that's what makes it secure. I mean, you can't get rid of the losing and keep the security. And I think we're going to do this over and over again. I'm sure that Jack from Twitter is probably developing a similar wallet. But the only other thing I had, it seems like a pathway for the wallet to be hacked as well. Once you have this recovery feature and you know that the firmware can get to the key, well, now hackers know exactly what to target, what kind of malware or virus to get onto that ledger. And if you look at the recent news, LastPassword was hacked because one of their administrators installed Plex onto his work laptop. Say what you will, you could have just bought a second laptop, used it only for Plex and video and whatever else, never used your work laptop for something else. And what you trust when the guy says, yes, you have to have trust in your hardware wallet company. I trust the developers to be paranoid. I trust them to be like those Bitcoin developers who are like, we can't raise the block limit because it makes it bloated and it makes it weaker and it makes it less secure. And like they said in Reservoir Dogs, I'm a professional here. I tell you my name, it gets out, it gets one step closer to me. And that can't happen. Those are the developers that I want working on my hardware wallet. And I don't see that here at Ledger with this, the feature, the direction. Like Dan says, forcing your existing class of people who have bought a different product to upgrade to the new mom and dad friendly product. And we even have a little bit of humor here to end out this issue. According to this guy, it says the new firmware update with a much smoother UX, and it says log into Facebook. It has the familiar blue button. Dan, do you have any more on this issue?
No. I mean, I do think that it's still better than holding your keys on an exchange, because you still, an exchange could go down and you lose everything, like full stop. There's no guarantees there. You could lose all of your Bitcoin. So, and obviously the exchange, your own profile on the exchange could be hacked. But this, I do think that, there is a slight use for it, but again, only from a completely separate device where people don't want, people don't want the idea of having to go and have a safe, probably of all the people I've introduced to Bitcoin, I reckon like none of them are storing their seed in a safe vault, and I'm not, because I do it in a different way. But it's still a kind of halfway house, I think, between storing your keys on an exchange and storing them on the hardware wallet. It's just done in a ridiculous way that's made everyone lose trust. And the guy from Ledger, the CEO or founder or whatever, said that but this is looking to the future when we can roll out to the next wave of people who aren't so crypto savvy. But the point is that everyone who's got one now is, the vast majority of them are pretty savvy when it comes to that, knowing that, if you store you lose your seed, you'll lose it forever. So you're changing your device to suit a market of people who aren't even mostly in Bitcoin yet. And you're screwing over the existing user base by making them lose trust in you. So it just seems it's a very odd approach, that's for sure. Maybe a separate device, I could imagine that, but basically saying, shrugging it off. We could have always extracted your keys, and while we do extract them, we extract them in 3 different parts. And it only gives us your seed phrase, which gives us every single private key that you have. So the whole thing is just one big PR nightmare. But it'd be interesting to see if there's a mass exodus to Satoshi Labs and Blockstream's Jade and all the other hardware wallets, Cold Card and all that.
It does seem like quite a mistake to change the firmware of the old customers' wallets who thought they bought a real hardware wallet. Again, I think it comes down to this basic idea that a true hardware wallet includes an element of danger, and that there's no way to separate the danger from the security. The danger and the security are the same. The user, and again, there's ways to do this. You could buy 5 hardware wallets and put 10% of your money into each one. You could buy 3 different safe deposit boxes at different banks. There's many options where you could properly secure these things and not have to worry as much. But if you include things like this recovery key, if you have things I don't like Wi-Fi access or Bluetooth access to your hardware wallet, you're just adding more ways for it to get hacked. And when it does get hacked, you'll unravel where the hack came from, and it'll probably be one of these obvious ways, like they use the recovery feature. So we're running out of time. We're going to move on to the next issue. Issue 5, attendance at the world's largest Bitcoin conference down by half as crypto winter drags on. Roughly 15,000 attendees are expected at the Bitcoin 2023 event versus 35,000 last year, likely as a downturn known as crypto winter. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the U.S. presidential candidate, is among scheduled speakers, as we can see here from a picture, and of course it's just a random photo, so it could show anything. There does seem to be less people. I don't see a giant volcano in the center with a really cool news desk made out of a miner. It looks like they have a stack of tables over there. If they still have the miner, that's awesome. But that was a beautiful desk, and it was a beautiful volcano. But yes, it does look like kind of a down year for the conference. I didn't make it out this year. Shout out to Martine and General Bytes, who are representing at the Miami Bitcoin conference. Dan, Eve, what do you think about the Miami conference? A little down this year, and some interesting speakers.
Right, so it's only natural, isn't it, that in a not all-time high phase, that or near all-time high phase, that the numbers will be down. As Coindesk said, that they're down about 25% on their blockchain week or whatever it was, the Coindesk sort of event. So that's probably going to be the same kind of across the board. I mean, it does sound like they've got there's another interesting set of characters going there. I know that one that's already ruffled like a bunch of feathers is BitBoy. I think Stacey Herbert's already trying to get him kicked out because he assaulted her. by the sounds of it. Although I don't think he assaulted her. It sounds like he insulted her because he called her a bitch or something. But it doesn't sound like he physically assaulted. It was a verbal assault. But either way, lots of controversial characters. It seems there. I like the article said gatherings typically provide a critical source of crucial critical. It's a bit critical is a bit too far up in the priorities. Gatherings typically provide a crucial source of networking and in real life personal interaction, because they know that most Bitcoiners literally just either like sit in the same chair all day looking at the price going up and down, or they sit in a basement coding something cool. Generally, whatever it is, it's in a cold, dark room. Because they don't want to like pay for heating, because unless they have a miner that's doing the heating for them, because otherwise they could be buying more Bitcoin with that money that went on heating or whatever else it was. So I think ultimately anywhere that does a conference is going to be down. Hopefully, the Mallorca blockchain days, which is coming up in July or August, I can't remember which time. Go and Google it. And that's going to be hopefully quite Mallorca blockchain days. I can't remember what day it is this time. It's on it's in July. Sorry, 13th of July, 2023, 13th to 16th. Hopefully that's not going to be down, because that's a really good conference and much better than the other ones. There we go, Mallorca blockchain days. But yeah, I'm not going to lie. I'd kind of like to be in Miami right now, hanging out with my team, and you if you were there, obviously Thomas and Ben, because it seems like there's lots of Nostr stuff and lots of LMBit stuff, there, but no Ben. So at least he's kind of there in code and spirit by the sounds of it. But it sounds like he would have got a lot bigger workshop again, even than last year. Like the workshops were huge for him last year, and I think a lot of people want to learn about LMBits and learn about Nostr. So yeah, there's definitely a lot to catch up on if you're watching the conference online. But yeah, I'm jealous I'm not there, to be honest, in Miami.
Yeah, I'm pretty disappointed they didn't include Ben, and that even though I know Ben is trying not to travel and he's trying to have less of a schedule, they should have went out of their way to get Ben to go there. If they had to buy him a plane or stick him some Bitcoin under his pillows, Ben has done so much with Nostr, so much with LNBit, so much with the physical devices. And I don't want to get mad at the kid or whatever. I'm sure the guy who's presenting LNBits was doing a good job and is on the team like everybody else. And the Nostr people, I'm sure they were all great. But I'm looking at his slides, and his slides are like Ben's hardware device, another Ben hardware device, and then his next slide is like all these things you can do, LN bits in the middle, and then all the other side, and I'm just like, this is Ben, where's Ben? And it's just a shout out to the amazing work he's done in the last few years, that he's transformed the open source desk at that conference. It's now a whole stage. There's all kinds of speakers. They're talking about Nostr. But I do also want to warn about the attendees at this event. It's interesting. Dan had the BitBoy story. I hadn't heard that yet. That's interesting to me. Quite a character there as well. But the one I'm concerned about, and going to go out on a political limb here, is RFK Jr., the presidential candidate. RFK Jr. was a fantastic environmentalist, but I want to warn you that he was an anti-vaccine crusader before the COVID vaccine. So back when Jenny McCarthy was saying the vaccines gave her children gave her children autism. I fucked it up. It's a A word, one off. Autism, not AIDS, my bad. But yes, vaccines are bad. Jenny McCarthy and RFK Jr. were standing up against vaccines. So I just worry about the Bitcoiners when it comes to the new people that come in, and the instant hero worship and the complete abandonment of any background checks that we tend to do. If you look at Michael Saylor, he was quite the party boy back in his early .com days. You can look that up. I don't think anyone has, and it's shocking. Bukele is obviously a dictator and very powerful. I don't want to insult him, but he's done some things. You could look him up. You could background check these guys before we say, hey, this guy's my new hero and he's the standard bearer of all Bitcoin and I hope he becomes president. We could look at the background, not just the last couple years, not just the speech they make today, but the speeches they made on other days. So I worry about kind of the ease of guru worship there. So what do you think, Dan? Obviously, I messed up the autism word. That was a big
that was quite interesting. But I just went and checked. I checked a site that I used to check out quite often. It actually hasn't been. Looks like it hasn't been updated since 2015. But it's called the JennyMcCarthyBodyCount.com. And like it's a count of all the preventable illnesses that would have been if it wasn't for, I'm not sure how the methodology of how they come up with this, but they've got preventable illnesses and preventable deaths and stuff like that.
You can share a screen if you want to.
Oh, I've got loads of. I wouldn't share my screen. Just go to Jenny. Just Google it. Jenny McCarthy body count. Not God. That makes it sound like I was looking at porn or something. Not in any way. I've just got a very messy desktop. It's like no one wants to see your messy room, right? When and so that's why I have a background.
It is unfortunate when people take these anti-scientific things and they say, "Oh, my cousin heard this," and "Oh, I feel this." And it's not backed up by a scientific study with 1,000 participants and a survey and all these kind of things. It does kind of, have this unfortunate result where, Jenny goes out there and she means the right thing. And I'm sure that RFK Jr. means the right thing as well. But it's almost like a religious conversion for these people. Previously, RFK Jr. was just one of the most impressive environmental lawyers and had an incredible argument for why we should protect the environment. And if that's all he'd done, and if that's what he was running on, I'd be an unbelievable supporter of him, as I think the entire Democratic Party would. But unfortunately, if you look back at his history, he very much led this early anti-vaccine movement, which in many ways led to the larger COVID anti-vaccine movement, which has led to the disease conquering humanity and becoming endemic. So we're going to have COVID shots every year like the flu. And it's always going to be a part of our society. And to see these vaccine preventable deaths, preventable other things because of so-called mercury in the vaccine or heavy metals or causes autism or whatever it was, which is just not scientifically backed. It's just scientifically, It doesn't prove out. It's fun when we have a government conspiracy or whatever, and we all get excited. But if you do the actual studies, and that's why if you read the actual Wikipedia page of RFK Jr., it's all about how these non-scientifically backed studies, and that he's linked up with this other vaccine denier who also believes in non-scientifically backed studies. I mean, the series of evidence collapses, and I fear, as we've said, Saylor, Bukele, RFK, the standard guys, Safety, any of these Bitcoiners, there's just not really any attempt to background check them. They come in and we say, hey, they're heroes, and then they're worshipped. And then later on, we find out they're like Sam Bankman-Fried with FTX. We had that guy, the hard-hitting news reporter, was like, oh, you still drive a Civic and you're going to give all your money away with effective altruism. And meanwhile, anybody could have gotten us on the inside there and said, hey, he's living in a giant penthouse with his buddies and they're all banging each other and they're doing wake up drugs, and we just doesn't seem like your normal kind of fintech.com situation. Kind of seems like some red flags, but instead everybody was waving the green flags. They're saying, hey, come on in, Sam, we love what you do. So
yeah, I've just realized as well, I'm actually wearing the New Yorker blockchain. I forgot the New Yorker blockchain days t-shirt. So check it out, even if you come just to get this amazing t-shirt. But yeah, there's actually another site called whatstheharm.net, and it's like saying, oh, these people mean well. But what's the harm, right? And so it gives like an A to Z of like how certain things from applied kinesiology to vampires to an astral projection to even they go as far as how feng shui, how that's ended up killing or harming someone, all the way down to Nigerian emails and stuff. It's quite interesting. Again, I think it's not a site that's been updated for a long while. It's probably like a decade or something. I mean, they still got RSS. Do they even do RSS anymore? I think they do, don't they? But anyway, yeah. So it's quite interesting. You can go on and just see. It has like stories of what's happened or people that have been. Oh dear, here you go. It's very morbid, isn't it? 3-year-old murdered by Jesus. Well, I've taken the show down a notch, but yeah, it's got all sorts of examples of where people kind of, perhaps stopped doing certain medical things because they thought it was going to save them and then ended up going bad, or they had some sort of exorcism that went wrong. Very interesting stuff. Yeah, from I think I've heard about that from Skeptic's Guide.
It's something you never thought you'd see. Like we had mumps and measles, some of these diseases pretty much cured, pretty much wiped out. And then with so many people not trusting the vaccine, and it's also part of this, like not being a part of society, where it's like, I need to protect my people. I don't want to protect the greater group of people. As they said recently, vaccines saved maybe 20 million people in COVID, according to scientific studies. So it's like, it's about the greater group. And you have to take some risk, like, because yes, there's a 3% or a 1%. There's a very small chances that you have side effects from certain vaccines. That does happen. But 97% protecting the greater good, millions of people. It's up to you, but I'm just saying, background check these people. Be more interested. Be more curious. Let's just not, put the crown on the next guy that shows up. But we're running out of time. Dan, do you have a prediction or a story of the week this week?
So, a little surprise I gathered earlier that it's okay. I've made it sound a lot more interesting than it is, but so I did one of those DNA test things, which is quite good. It was all good until my girlfriend, we had to go on Jeremy Kyle and open the results on that. No, I'm joking.
Maury Povich, and the father is?
But the craziest thing is that, and this is genuinely crazy, maybe not for you guys, but I found it interesting. I'm not even English. I've literally got 0% English in me, and I thought I was English. I'm like mostly Iberian, Northwest European, Italian, Scandinavian, and a bit of Jewish, and also a bit of Middle East and West Asian. So yeah, that was so that's why I'm renouncing the English and their stupid turning Bitcoin into a gambling thing and taxing it anyway. Yeah, so
I haven't done one myself, but I've looked at the ones that my parents did, so I think I have a generally good idea. But one of the most interesting things about those tests is that they always expose that our genetic history is more complicated, that we're made up of more different people, and that the very idea of like a whiteness or a blackness or whatever, really, you're from, this in the Middle East and this in the South and this in the North, all over everybody is these kind of mutts with these, multiracial backgrounds. And this purity idea is completely wrong, completely backwards, has no actual truth in reality. And the more people that do these tests, as some people might be horrified, they might be, oh no, I have this in my background. But more, I think it's true about everybody. And the same thing for the historical thing. Have you ever seen they do like they're like, oh, Ben Affleck, who was your great 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 grandfather? And sadly, if you're on the East Coast or if you're in the South or whatever, I think he was a slaver. I think they were involved in the the slave trade and these kind. And Affleck is just, oh my God, losing his thing. But the same thing, you check your DNA, you check your history, and it's not always what you want. So,
I think I would say though, like, so we obviously we got my well, as a family we got it done. So me, my girlfriend, and our 2 kids, and I'm more surprised at my kids' results than I am at mine, and so. I'm proven as the father. Fortunately, not that it was ever a question.
That could be very surprising if they don't match at all. Yes, they didn't match at all.
Unless she's got an insider that works there. No, but what's interesting is that it's not even a remote 50-50. I mean, there's a huge difference. In some categories, like the kids are more of a category, way more as a percentage than I am. So you kind of think it really, or my girlfriend is. So it really it's really interesting to get it done as a family. Yeah, I was quite surprised. The general groups, what I knew was Maltese, like the main genetic groups. But yeah, I was surprised to see that literally on the map, I looked at it and there's like England's got no color on it whatsoever. It's all the rest of like Europe and like even like North Africa and Western Asia. So I thought that was quite interesting. Yeah, so I'm not even English anymore. Learned something new every day.
The Maltese connection there is such a storied island. So many people stopping throughout the histories. It reminds me a little bit.
Colonized. One of the most
Indeed.
colonized places.
It
Yeah,
reminds me.
indeed.
It reminds me of the Sicilian speech from True Romance, but I'm not going to even touch that at all. You guys can
Mm.
go look that up. It's classic. My story of the week is that I, like many people on the internet, am playing the new Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom. Having a pretty good time so far. It feels a little bit like a sequel to the Zelda they came out with 5 years ago, but it does seem to have stuff about the sky and the chasms below. So the world of Zelda is getting bigger. The last Zelda was very much kind of Zelda plus Minecraft. You could craft different items together to make elixirs, to make food. This one furthers that. Now, I haven't been able to do it yet, but you can make, it says when you show the weapons, it's like 4 sticks plus heavy rock equals hammer. And so that clearly there's recipes now on the weapons. There's sky and chasms to explore. There's kind of little gliders you can fly. There's little potential to build tanks, perhaps, I've heard on the internet. But yeah, it's just another great game in the Zelda series. I don't play that many video games anymore, but when they release a Zelda game, I try to, set aside some time and play that thing. So if you're playing the Zelda, say hi in the chat. Let me know how it's going for you. Maybe hit me up on Twitter. Doing pretty good. Got stuck a little bit. Really glad to be off of Tutorial Island. It was far too big, and I was stuck there for far too long. And I could see how some people would think maybe that's the whole game. But because it is a huge, huge tutorial island with a lot of stuff to learn. But if you played the last game, it's pretty much the same.
Is it as good as the Ocarina of Time?
I don't know. I didn't think that's a Super Nintendo one. I think
N64.
Yeah, I've missed out the two N64 ones I have to play, and the second one on the Wii or whatever it was, Twilight Princess or something. I have to play that one. So I don't know. I think it's as good as the last one, which I was really impressed with. The climbing, because you can climb up stuff and then you can jump off with your little hang glider and you can fly all around the world. That was really fun. The one I liked last was the one on the GameCube, Zelda for Sailing. And it was all cell shaded animation, and you would sail a boat everywhere. So it is interesting to see that it's always about transportation, the new ways that you can get around in the new Zelda.
Yeah, that was it. Like the Ocarina of Time, I think, was like the first game where you could ride a horse, and it was pretty cool. Otherwise, it took the game map was so massive, it took hours to walk until you like earned the portal thing.
See, that's huge. Riding a horse is huge, and even now I've been looking for some horses, but haven't quite found them yet. I do kind of like the Zelda, the Link guy just running off into the nowhere. You got a bag full of arrows and a sword, and you just go out into the world. It is kind of fun. Just the exploring aspects of the game. I think that's what I really like. And then the puzzles. And the puzzles get slowly harder. They do a really good job of like giving you all the tools, and then you're like, oh, maybe that'll work. Maybe that'll work. Oh, I just got that thing. I'll try that, and you use that to get through the puzzles. I think that's what makes it such a great game. But we talked about Zelda too much. This is a Bitcoin show. Let's get back to work. Although I do have a Zelda Bitcoin connection. About 4 or 5 years ago when I was still in San Francisco, Roast Beef, the legendary Lightning developer, was also playing Zelda, and we were both crazy into it. So it was super fun at the time, and I hope that he is enjoying the new Zelda, as I imagine that he probably is. Not working on Lightning, working on the new Zelda. But thanks to everybody for joining us, giving us a thumbs up, and chatting in the chat down below. Send us a comment on the YouTube. We'll be back again next week. And until next time, bye-bye.